Hey, it's Carly, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make this cutout long sleeve top. It is a Handmade by Carly sewing pattern. It's my first pattern I've made. I'm so excited about it. I worked really hard to put this together, and I hope that it's easy to follow, but here is a video tutorial to show you how. Here are all the supplies that you'll need for this project. You'll need your Handmade by Carly sewing pattern. I already printed mine, taped it together, and cut it out. You'll want some scissors, some thread, some fabric, about 1 yard to 1.5 yards, depending on your size. This is just like a sweatery, like knit fabric that I found, and some sewing pins, not necessary, but I do recommend it. And then if you want to do the binding on the front cutout detail, you'll get one of these bias tape makers. They're really cheap on Amazon. This one's 18 millimeters, and then an iron to press that and your hems down. Lay your fabric out flat and put your pattern pieces on top. I'm using pattern weights to hold them down, and cut around the edge. The seam allowance is included and shown on the line so that you can visualize it. Notice that each pattern piece says cut 1 or cut 2 on them. For the binding pieces and the sleeves, you'll need to cut 2 of those pattern pieces. I do have a suggested layout for you in the instructions. However, you can cut them out and lay them out however you'd like on your fabric. And here are all the pieces that you should have: the back shell, the front shell that I just put on top, the front yoke, the collar, two sleeves, and 2 pieces of binding for the front. Start by laying out the back shell and put the front yoke on top of it. You'll line up the top and pin along where the shoulder seam will be. And then you're just going to do a straight stitch on each shoulder seam. Next, you're going to lay that out and then put the front shell and line up the edges from the armpit to the bottom of the top. Pin along those sides, and then you're going to do a straight stitch all the way down each side. Next, we're doing the binding, so put those binding pieces inside the bias tape maker, and we're just going to iron it down flat the way it folds it over in the bias tape maker. I'm putting my pattern weights down on it just to press it and make sure it stays flat. Then you're going to fold it over one more time to have a double fold binding, and just fold it over and iron that down as well. Here is what it should look like. If you open it, it'll be folded over. Now you are going to take those binding pieces and we're going to place the fabric of the front shell inside of the folded part of the binding and pinning it on. It'll be a little bit longer, but we'll trim that off on the ends, and then do the same for the yoke. Then we're going to do a top stitch over each piece, making sure to get both sides of the binding as well as the middle fabric included. I always just lift up a little when I take out the pin just to make sure that the fabric is inside the binding, holding it all together. And here's how it should look. Then you're just going to trim off the excess binding pieces. Okay, so at this point I do recommend trying it on. Where the next seam is going to just be sewing together this little overlapping area. The yoke will go over the bottom part, and depending on your bust size or just how you want this cutout to look, there will be a different overlap length. So you can see I put a little pin on each side. This is what I decided I wanted the cutout to look like. If I did it more, it would be smaller, or less to have it be a looser fit, up to you. But yeah, the next seam is just gonna be just a little top stitch just to keep it in place, because we're gonna sew it all nice together once we put the sleeves on, but just to hold it in place for now. Next, fold the sleeve piece in half and then pin along the edge. Do this for both sleeves and then just do a stitch down the pinned area. Now lay the bodice out inside out and then turn your sleeves right side out so it has the clean seam on the bottom. Then you're going to take the sleeve and put it inside of the bodice, having the seam be on the bottom that will line up with the armpit edge seam of the bodice. You can see how I'm lining up those two seams right there. I'm going to pin that, then take the highest point of the sleeve by folding it in half and taking that point and putting it to the top shoulder seam. Then I'm going to pin around the rest of the sleeve hole, just making sure that the fabric is as evenly stretched out as possible. Then I'm going to do a straight stitch around this circle. Since it's a small armhole circle, you'll need to keep pulling the fabric through like I'm doing right there and just laying it flat until you get all the way to the end again. Now take the collar piece and fold it in half on the longest side and then do a straight stitch. Now it should be a circle and then fold it over so it should start to look more like a collar now. Then take the shirt and put the collar upside down inside of the shirt. Now I'm measuring the halfway point of the back and lining that up with the seam on the collar, pinning together those 3 layers of fabric, the 2 on the collar and the 1 on the shirt. Then I'm pinning the middle of the front and then the 2 sides where the shoulders are and stretching it out just to make sure it is even. And then I'm going to sew along those 3 layers of fabric as shown here. Your shirt is almost done. The final step is just to do a hem on the bottom and the sleeves. Okay, so here's the final product. I think it turned out so cute. I always wear it with high-waisted jeans. If you made this top, I'd love to see what you made. Please tag me at Handmade by Carly. Thank you so much for purchasing this pattern. And if you'd like to purchase it, it'll be available on my Etsy shop. I will link that down below. And thank you so much. Let me know if you have any questions.